has some talking in between.
Looking forward to it.
I'll probably give you a 5 around 22 to try and
Perfect.
20 minutes too.
Perfect. Arizona. Phoenix. Nice to see you.
Hello.
1, 2, 1, 2, make it. Go. Give me 1 minute.
We can hear you. The people online won't be able to hear you, but we can. Yeah.
Testing, testing, testing.
Testing. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. Ooh, that sounds good. Sounds like I don't know.
Are we all okay here? Can you hear it?
No,
No?
I'll do it off and on.
Nope, nope, nope. It says green.
Green is good.
Hello?
I'll come on to the
1, 2, 1, 2.
Is this working? It won't. It's on.
Yeah, yeah.
Testing, testing. Oh, that sounds good.
Does this sound good? No, doesn't sound good. Not yet.
She's taking that out to see if that
Okay. Technology, I don't
I had the
understand.
same issue last night.
Yes, yes. Did you have last night?
We had the same issue last night.
Okay.
Got one more.
LA Music Festival. night 2 of Bloomington Early Music Festival 25, Early Music in the African Diaspora. We have 2 excellent people on stage today to take a peek onto top. We have Paul Ball, Treasurer of Bloomington Early Music, and musicologist, musician. He told me not to bite him up too much, so. And then we have Director of Tonos del Sur, also Director of the Bloomington Early Music Initiative, which is the training program that Bloomington Early Music does during the week, which on Saturday you should come see the performance. Sarah Creator. And with that, enjoy the free concert session.
Thank you.
Well, we have an interesting program, and I want to begin by pointing out its connection with last night. We heard a composer from Portugal. Okay, Portugal, take it 2 centuries later than the one we heard last night, owned Brazil. It was part of their connection, partly because of both the Pope and then the agreement of the Tordesillas agreement in 1494. Okay, so what happens is that the Spanish tended to settle in the New World. The Portuguese tended to come over and go back and take things from them and bring them back to Portugal. Okay, so what happens? In the early 19th century, Napoleon is going all over everywhere, and the Portuguese emperor leaves Portugal and stays in Rio de Janeiro for about 6-7 years. And so indeed, part of this is the composer that became very well known and very well liked by the Portuguese court in the early 19th century. But before all of that, he was brought up in Brazil, a talented youngster who didn't get the best of musical training, but went beyond it. And tonight you're going to hear one of the earliest pieces preserved by him. What do you want to say about him that you know? Yeah.
Sure, yeah, tonight, so we start with the earliest surviving piece. He was 16 when he wrote it. And it's got a beautiful solo flute line, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, and strings and organ. So you hear kind of the seeds of what you will hear later in the program. It's really just lovely. It's kind of charming. It has a couple fun little moments, and then it's kind of just a beautiful, peaceful journey. But I think you can see like the hints of things to come.
That's wonderful. Anyway, I'd like to ask you how you came about knowing about this repertory, and how did you go about selecting the works that we're going to hear tonight?
Sure. Well, actually, I have to thank Suzanne for bringing his name up. I was trying to come up with, I had a couple different ideas floating, as usually goes when you start a project. Like, well, it could go this way, it could go this way. I had thought it would be interesting, and it turned out to be way beyond the scope of where I am at, but someone should do it as a dissertation or maybe like 7 books, to think about the idea of programming chapel masters from varying backgrounds. And it turns out I got really in the weeds trying to figure out what was the heritage of some of these chapel masters, because sometimes it was easy for contemporaries to sort of hurl an insult at someone, or if you didn't like someone, you would make a disparaging comment about their skin color, which may or may not be true. It might have just been your way to insult them, unfortunately. And then sometimes those from more diverse backgrounds were trying to put that aside so they could raise within the Catholic Church and within the nobility. So I learned many amazing, terrible things, and also that was totally beyond what we're going to do tonight. So please, someone research this further, and then I can read your book. But then I was very excited about discovering Jose Mauricio Núñez Garcia's music. And originally I had thought it would be very cool to bridge a composer I was slightly more familiar with, Sigismund Newcomb, who has some really wonderful chamber music. And I thought, okay, we could have some of Garcia's music, some of Newcomb's music. In fact, Newcomb wrote a song, a lovely art song for forte piano and a high voice type, to my friends in Rio de Janeiro when he was leaving after spending some musical time. And I thought, well, that would be lovely. But then we couldn't have a fortepiano and an organ. It's like too many pieces in a puzzle. So it kind of just kept getting narrowed down until it really became clear that what would be best and what we were most excited about this evening was just Nunez Garcia's music, and especially spending a lot of time on IMSLP, which is a great place, trying to figure out what would fit our forces. Because actually much of his surviving music is for forces much larger. So there's some fantastic, enormous forces, flutes, oboes, clarinets, trumpets, timpani, bassoon, strings, double bass. I can't remember if I've left anything out. That whole huge ensemble, and that just doesn't quite work for this. So, okay, what fits Tonos, and what do we need to add to Tonos to pull this off? Fortunately, have a fantastic flute player, Leanne, you're gonna hear tonight. And then also, one of the things I'm most excited about adding to Tonos' regular forces are two wonderful natural horn players. Sarah Patokas and Michael Stiles are gonna play. And actually, Sarah left her crooks up, which is awesome. So you can see them kind of behind Paul. So they will be adding natural horn. Every time we change keys, they will change crooks. So that's kind of a fun thing we got to explore. We were also really excited to explore repertoire that's slightly newer, later than what Tonos normally does. And then also what the composer, was able to do with these forces. It's really pretty remarkable. I'll just add one more thing to that before I get too lengthy here. The second piece you'll hear, he also goes the most sparse. There's actually a lot of music surviving where he just wrote a mass for singers and organ. And you think, like, okay, we know this. But actually he used the organ in a very unusual way. So he asked, most of the time, Anastasia to be a regular basso continuo player, bass line and realized figures. But then he's put places in the score where he's asked for specific sounds. In the little excerpt I've chosen, just the credo, we only get the trumpet sounds. Someday I hope you get to hear this entire mass, because there are all kinds of instrument sounds he has asked for the organ to have registration sounds coming out. So you hear essentially a one-person orchestra with the singers. So that was a very lengthy answer to your question, but that's what we're excited about tonight.
Very good, yes. A lot of, or actually most of Nunez Garcia's music is sacred music appropriate for various church services or ceremonies in the Catholic Church. And when the emperor came over, Nunez Garcia was already rather well known by the politics in Rio de Janeiro, and he became the choral master for the emperor until the emperor brought his own over from Lisbon, and then there seems to have been some sort of competition. But indeed, Nunez Garcia wrote several masses of a variety of sorts for ceremonies. There are a few secular pieces, but they're not as well known nor as often performed as most of the sacred works in this case. And this performance tonight will celebrate as Sarah mentions, the variety of instrument types and accompanimental types and expansiveness of this variety of some 25 or 26 various masses. The litany we hear tonight is almost by mistake appropriate for the United States holiday today. It's Memorial Day. And those of us who are veterans and revere the colleagues that we had, in my day it was the Vietnam War, and it's happened since, of course. But in this case, we have the litany for Mary of Dolor, the Saint Mary of sadness, of things that regret and whatnot. And so, in fact, this key portion of the performance tonight is extraordinarily appropriate for tonight.
Purely by accident.
But a happy accident in this case.
Yes,
I think.
thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, of course. I do think that the variety of instrumentation that we have here was a challenge for Sarah, because many of the things require, excuse me, the rather ample musical forces that were available in Brazil at the turn of the 19th century. And so the variety that we find both tonight, but also in his entire repertory, is a rather interesting contrast with what one might ordinarily expect. We also know that because of what he was able to get in education, he studied the late classical composers such as Mozart. And so you will hear influences of that in the works that we're going to hear here, at least to the extent that it is classical rather than romantic, classical rather than Baroque, classical rather than Renaissance, which is what we heard last night. And so this progression of musical style over the centuries is part of what's going to happen over this week in a variety of ways of our musical education and our musical experience. Mm-hmm.
Yes, actually, in rehearsal, we were even kind of commenting amongst ourselves. Most of what Tonos del Sur has done up to this point has been much more squarely in the Baroque era. And as we started, it's like, wow, we have really left this behind. Like, some of these vocal lines are just not what we normally have played or sung, which is really, really fun. The sense of accompanimental figures are very much more like what we expect from Mozart. In fact, one of the musicians backstage was even commenting there's a particular earworm that we all keep singing all week, and it has a tendency to morph into a Mozart melody if you're not careful, which is pretty great. We can hear this influence, and if I'm not mistaken, actually, Newcomb helped Garcia become familiar, and Garcia was able to give the inaugural performance of Mozart's Requiem in Brazil. So we have a very, very close connection here between those musical styles.
That's right, yes, absolutely. I would like to ask you, where does the name Tonos del Sur come from, and how long have you been named that particular organization?
Thanks. Well, we got our starts right here in Bloomington, which is amazing. I think it was 2018, Javier Leon from the Latin American Music Center approached me about teaching a course or running the Latin American Music Ensemble, or I seem to mix up the acronym, but the joke was that it was the LAME ensemble, but it was not lame, it was cool. And it was open campus-wide. You could be any type of engager with music as long as you were willing to commit to doing it in a historically informed way. So the very first semester we had doctoral violinists in Baroque violin, like students of Stanley Ritchie, all the way to someone learning how to play F-sharp on a Baroque bassoon for the very first time, and everything in between, which was really a lot of fun. The course kind of morphed over the next 2 years, and then the pandemic. And so at that point, we kind of took the people that were most enthusiastic and kind of most regular and rebranded, independent from IU. So Tonos del Sur now is kind of usually most of the same faces. You'll see many familiar faces tonight. And it's basically a project-based consortium of people who are excited about this repertoire. So we are especially excited about bringing modern premieres of old music, US premieres of old music, and then we've worked quite a bit and would like to work more with especially bringing music that is by anonymous authors. It's often overlooked. And then music in indigenous languages. And we've made a few partnerships, especially in Bolivia, with help with Chiquitano Becerro. And then we've had help with Quechua, with a scholar from the University of Michigan, for example, things like that. And also working with musicologists who are transcribing things from archives that we're not able to get into. So that's really become the latest focus.
I do think the approach to music of the Americas, del Sur, especially not necessarily the United States, but things south of our particular unit, is a rather interesting approach. And you're right, the the lack of familiarity with a lot of that repertory, whether it's early, whether it's even 19th century, is sort of still surprising in the United States, as a matter of fact. My own interest, of course, is from Central America, and right here in Bloomington, we have a collection of 16th century manuscripts from the Cuchumatanes Mountains of Guatemala, and that has been performed here a couple of times by various groups. But it's this sort of thing that needs to be encouraged, and this group is doing an excellent job of it. The issue that I see, not the issue, the significance I see, is the fact that you do have a variety of performing instruments. It's not just the vocal things, it's not just the instrumental things, it's not just the continuo things, but it is the great variety. And I think the program tonight, as you mentioned, is a very good example of how you can expand, how this group can expand its interest and its expertise to everything else at this point.
Thank you. I have to say we're very thankful. A couple specific scholars have really helped us along the way.
Paul Feller?
2 years ago, we heard, you might have heard, we helped bring to life some manuscripts from Puebla, Mexico,
Yes.
thanks to Cesar Favila and Paul Feller, thank you. Sorry, I can see his face. Paul Feller, and so things like that led to a partnership where Paul shared a bunch of manuscripts from Chile, which we were able to perform in Chicago. Tonight, one of the pieces we have, I actually tracked down a scholar website, Facebook, WhatsApp. It's just really complicated. I felt like I was sort of stalking him, but he's been really generous and very helpful in getting us parts. So that kind of thing, I think that's what makes me really excited. Like, I have finally been able to get inside the Bogota archive in Colombia, but not for long enough to transcribe anything myself. So I'm so grateful for scholars who are willing to hand us their work, and then we get to make it so you can hear it.
Over the past 50 years, the interest in all of these various archives and repertory that is virtually unknown by the way musicology was taught when I was a student is increasingly interesting, and a variety of things. And I will then brag and say that it was 6 years ago that I worked with several of the people in this particular group at one of the performances here at the festival to do an abbreviated performance, semi-staged, of the earliest opera surviving from the New World, the Púrpura de la Rosa by Torrejón Velasco from Peru. Anyway, it is and it was a very interesting experience, and I urge you to appreciate this particular group of people so much. Okay, we've been
Thank
told
you.
that it's about time, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was wonderful, Paul.
Was it okay?